Welcome to the H series of webinars. This series is aimed at new and aspiring sheep producers to give them a step up into the Queensland sheep industry. This hunger webinar is part 9 of the series and covers how the rumen works, meeting feed requirements, and monitoring the condition score of your animals. This webinar was delivered by Geoff Duddy from Sheep Solutions on the 7th of July 2021. This is clip 6 of 6 and covers the need for protein, the nutritional requirements of different classes of animals, the importance of fibre, and a summary of the webinar.
Okay, what's protein needed for? It's needed for things like muscle development, appetite, and wool production. Young lambs are trying to build body mass, so muscle development and a very high protein requirement. This is the one stage where, and my rough rule of thumb is whatever the energy content of the ration or their intake is, add about 4, and that should be what the protein is. And I'll show you a graph in a second. Whereas mature animals who have done all their bodybuilding and are really just putting fat on at stages, their protein needs are nowhere near as high as a growing lamb. Although bacteria make up most of the bypass protein, that's what I'm saying, it's important to have a really good balanced gut that's working properly. Bacteria make up a lot of the bypass protein which can be used, but sheep need about 7% minimum protein in their diets to start with. Okay, so we need to have reasonable protein to start with. If we don't have enough protein, what happens? We have a drop off in the number of bugs in the gut, the whole digestive process slows down, intake drops, production suffers. So we need to look at keeping protein levels up. Your protein requirements are going to be higher, as I said, as your production stage or physiological stage, and also if you have higher energy increases. We need to balance this energy and protein, particularly for younger lambs. Now this graph, we're looking at 20, 30, 40 and 50 kilo lambs. Here on the bottom we have our energy intake, and then to be balanced, we'll see what protein requirements are needed. As I mentioned before, young lambs have got a lot of bodybuilding to do, so they have a really high protein requirement. So if we look at a 40 kilo lamb on 12 megs of energy, he's going to need about 14% protein. If it's a 20 kilo lamb though, with this huge protein need, you need to add about 4, so about 16 or 17% protein required. In terms of ewes and dry sheep and their stages of production, we have the production state down here on the left-hand column, our energy and our crude protein ballpark requirements. So for survival, we need about 8 megs of energy and about 7% protein. For growth and for finishing, somewhere around that 10 to 12 megajoules of energy and 2 to 4 units higher than that for protein requirement. In terms of lactation and late pregnancy, protein doesn't really go through the roof except for that early milking stage, that early stages after lamb birth, and where it may sort of need around about 16% or so protein. Just want to quickly talk about fibre and the importance of it. It stimulates cud chewing and that saliva production through that regurgitating and re-chewing of the cud. It diverts phosphorus away from the urine into the manure, which actually helps balance up the calcium phosphorus that's happening in the urine, which is particularly important if anyone's ever had bladder stones or water belly in wether lambs in particular. That's usually due to that imbalance of calcium phosphorus. It slows the whole gut process down, so the bugs have got time to actually do what they do best and break that feed down and produce those volatile fatty acids and ammonia. It increases B12, vitamin B12 absorption. Now B12 is actually needed for energy production. It provides additional vitamin D. It improves magnesium availability and absorption. Magnesium is also needed for energy production. It's also needed for nerves and muscle contraction. It also increases milk fat. Higher rates of milk fat in the first couple of days of birth in particular, after birth, can really make a big impact on lamb survival. Effective fibre though is the key. Effective fibre is basically fibre that will stimulate the rumen wall. So it's not ground fibre, okay? It's not. The more we actually process and feed shorter and shorter lengths of fibre, the further we get away from this stimulating cud chewing and bicarb production. This effective fibre stimulates the rumen, releases digestive juices, helps maintain contractions, mixes all the rumen contents, and stimulates that cud chewing. So as I mentioned, we don't really want to change that fibre length. If you actually look at the amount of time and the amount of saliva produced when we feed, say, straight grain or pellets compared to a mixture of straight roughage or a mixture of grain and roughage, it really does reduce the amount of chewing and the amount of saliva that's being produced. Just in summary, that an efficient rumen drives production. Okay, so we've got to balance up that energy and protein in particular. We've got to maintain fibre levels in the diet. We haven't discussed vitamins and minerals, but it's important to look at the energy, protein, fibre and digestibility of the feed. There might be a bulk of dry feed out in a paddock, but a ewe at the point of lambing or early lactation really cannot physically harvest dry feed and get their energy requirements met. You need to try and meet the animal's feed needs. So you need to know at the stage of production that they are what their feed requirement is in terms of energy in particular. And to do that, really, the best tool really is your hand, to actually get your hand on your ewes and monitor body condition score.
Thank you for watching this short clip. For more information, please visit www.bleedingsheep.com.au.